Hello and welcome to episode number 56 of Chel Squared. I'm your host, Andrew Chelney, and as always, we've got a ton to talk about today. Before we dive into today's show, the social media plug is in order as per usual. Please follow the podcast on Twitter at Chel Squared and on Facebook at Chel Squared for more hot takes, news by featured guests, poll questions, and a whole lot more. If you want to follow my personal Twitter, it's at Chelney Andrew. Please rate the show if you enjoy listening. It means more to me that I could put into words. And as an incentive, I will give you a shout out on social media and on the podcast if you leave a rating or review, follow the show or whatever else. Every time you like the show on SoundCloud, give it a rating on Apple Podcasts, follow it on Spotify, etc. It makes me feel great. It helps the show out as well. I've ordered a lot of food over the years, and unless some of those places want to sponsor the show, I don't make any money off the podcast. This is done out of love in my spare time. So when I see a new rating, a review, a share, or whatever else, it makes me feel great. So please do that if you haven't already. Again, Chel Squared is a part of National Podcast Network, a network dedicated to NHL podcasts. Check the show out on there by going to nationalpodcast.network/Chel Squared. And though I am a SiriusXM employee, this podcast is not affiliated in any way with the company. The opinions expressed in this podcast are mine and mine alone and may or may not reflect the views of SiriusXM. If you're angry at my takes, direct them to me and me alone, please and thank you. The first half of the show is centered around the Colorado Avalanche, a team that's been very active over the past few weeks. The biggest moves, including trading for Burakovsky at the draft and for Nazem Kadri on the first day of free agency, as well as signing Jonas Donskoi to a 4-year deal. All these moves, and they still have the most cap space in the entire league, sitting at almost $2 million under the cap floor. What will the Avs do with all that space? We'll discuss that, plus give them an overall grade for the moves they've made to this point. What are the expectations for Colorado this season after losing Varlamov in free agency to the Islanders? What's the bar this team has to reach in 2020 for the season to not be deemed a failure? We'll get into all of that, the poll question, a whole lot more. Joining Chel Squared for the first half of the show is editor-in-chief of Colorado Hockey Now and has been covering the Avalanche for well over 2 decades and is the author of 7 books, including the most recent 100 Things Avs Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die, released in 2016. Adrian Dater. Adrian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, son. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And before we get into hockey here, I want to follow up with the brief conversation we had on Twitter the other day. You quoted a Super 70s sports tweet that said, if you had to pick any player in basketball history to make one free throw with your life depending on the outcome, who you got? You said Larry Bird, no debate. I respond with Steve Nash with like a word, and you reply with one word, and that word was please. Now, I know you're a Bird fan. It's in your Twitter bio, and I'm not suggesting anything negative about Larry Bird, obviously one of the all-time greats, but Larry Bird made 88.57% of his career free throws, while Steve Nash hit 90.43%. The only player to do it better is Steph Curry, who's currently hitting 90.47%. In this ridiculous hypothetical, what is your reasoning for sticking to your guns and wanting Larry Bird in that situation?
Well, let's see. Does 3 championships sound good? The question, I think, was who would we want the free throw to win, to one free throw to win a game, to your life dependent on it. In the pressure situation, I want Larry. You can have your extra 2% from Steve Nash. He played in a different era, a little easier to make shots, weren't quite as winded, didn't play the physical kind of ball Bird had to play down low all the time, banging and crashing against guys like Bill Laimbeer and Rick Mahorn and Daryl Dawkins. So he got off to that line pretty winded, and yet he still knocked down almost 89% of his free throws. But I bet if you look back and look at the free throws in the last minute of a game or the last minute of overtime to either tie a game, put the team up by 1, I bet Larry's percentage was a little higher than 88.8 or whatever the official stat is all time. So that's my rationale. Steve Nash was a nice little player for a good long time. Didn't quite have the team success that Larry Bird had, or the individual success, frankly. 3 MVPs also for Larry. 3 3-point shootout king championships right in a row. The hit from French Lick. That's my choice. I'm sticking to the guns.
That's fair. That's a fair argument. I can't argue with it. I mean, looking
there with Larry. You had to go there with Larry for me. So once I hear Larry and arguments with Larry, all bets are off. I'm in Larry's corner. So
I'm not. No one's knocking Larry, man. No one here is. No one. There's two people in this conversation, and zero of the two people are knocking Larry Bird. No one is saying anything negative.
Okay.
About
All
Larry
right.
Bird, but I'm saying that statistically speaking, obviously, I don't know how into analytics you are, but this is just a normal stat here. Not even looking at advanced analytics here, but statistically, on paper at least, Steve Nash has consistently hit more of his free throws, and if
Well,
in this situation, which will hopefully never, I feel like hopefully never happen, right? If it does happen, I feel like there are bigger problems at hand. But in this situation,
there should be some analytics though that further break it down. I mean, isn't somebody from your generation gone back in the tapes and broken it down into the final minute or anything? Free throw percentage in the final minute of a tie game. Well, that would settle it, wouldn't it? Why can't we get that stat?
It's probably on Basketball Reference somewhere, but you got to dig deep and deep and even deeper to potentially find find out.
If you find out and Larry was the winner, then expect a public shout out over it.
You
and
absolutely.
And if he wasn't, then don't say anything. Okay, let's talk hockey. How about that?
Well, I can't promise you that I won't say anything if Steve Nash is the winner there. But let's talk about the Avs here. So obviously one of the most active teams since the draft, and they've drafted pretty well and all that. But taking the names that they've drafted aside, from a purely free agency and trade perspective, they've been also very active. One of the biggest things that they've done is trading for Nazem Kadri. Now, that Kadri initially was going to go to the Calgary Flames, and it was on Sportsnet yesterday. It was reported that he nixed that deal because he wanted to stay in Toronto initially. He said no to Calgary because he felt like he wanted to be a Leaf, and said no because he didn't want to be moved, which obviously happened anyway. Now he's in Colorado. So the whole move again was Nazem Kadri, Calle Rosen, and a 3rd-round pick for Tyson Barrie, Alex Kerfoot, and a 6th-round pick. I had Dave McCarthy on the show last week for a Toronto perspective, and he liked this deal. Now, on the other hand, now here's a Colorado perspective. What do you think about this deal, and what do you think led up to this? What were the conversations being had prior to this deal going down?
Well, first of all, I would say that I think it's a deal that the rare deal that I think can win for both sides. I think it was a deal that both sides had a need for, and if the trade works out the way it should, then I don't think there's any winner or loser in this thing. They're both winners. The Avalanche feel like they've got their number 2 center, which they needed. They also feel like they got a guy who's still pretty young, who has, I believe, signed for the next 3 years at a pretty good cap number. They like that a lot. And the fact is they had a surplus of, if you want to call it offensive defenseman, you can. The emergence of Cale Makar as the heir apparent, really, to Barrie as the offensive guy, the power play quarterback kind of guy, made him expendable. And he also, with the Avalanche needing that number 2 center, not getting the top 3 pick in the draft, they probably would have taken Jack Hughes if they had a number 1 pick like they thought they might. They had the best odds, but of course they didn't win. Well, you can debate the best odds thing, but we won't go into that. But the fact they didn't get that center in the draft, they went for a defenseman who made Barrie even more superfluous. Bo Byram's addition made it clear that this was a deal they should make. Kadri said yes to the Avalanche, I guess, and I think the odds are glad they did. That's not taking away from Barrie at all. He's an excellent player and a guy, and he's going to do well in Toronto. But speaking from purely need standpoint, I think the Avalanche did what they needed to do. There'd been a lot of discussions in the last couple of weeks about it. There were talks with Vancouver about almost a deal there, but I do think that something broke down on what they asked for. There's some rumors that Bo Horvat was the guy the Avs wanted back, and Vancouver didn't do it. Wanted to pawn off Jake Virtanen instead, and it didn't work out. So Toronto stepped up with the Kadri offer, and Joe Sakic said yes. So here we are.
For the Bo Horvat trade that didn't happen, I assume if the trade did go down, then Colorado would have to give up maybe an extra second or another, maybe a first round pick to make that work. Would Colorado have been okay with that, do you think, to get a player like Bo Horvat?
Well, maybe. I mean, I don't, I'm looking at the stats of Bo Horvat, and I don't think they're that much different from Nazem Kadri. In fact, Kadri has better goal scoring seasons than Bo Horvat has in his career, so arguably he's a better defensive player too. So I'm not sure on that. I think I don't think the Avs would have expected to throw anything else in on that. Bo Horvat may be beloved in Vancouver, but he's he's a very good player. But the fact is, he's a 50. He had 61 points last year. That's a career high. He's also playing with much better players than he was, and that helps. Earlier in his career, you're looking at 82 games, 16 goals, 40 points one year. 64 games, 44 points another year. Good numbers, not awe-inspiring numbers, not quite the numbers I don't think that you deserve a first-round pick for, and Tyson Barrie. I think that's why. If you were the GM right there, Jim Benning, I think that's why we didn't get a deal. Is he wanted more for Horvat than maybe he's worth.
Fair enough. And another big trade that you made at the draft, which I mentioned, was to get Andre Burakovsky's RFA rights for a prospect and 2 picks in 2020. Now, Burakovsky's career high goals is 17, and he hit that in 15-16 a few years ago. Never hit 40 points. Is a player that he's 24, so he still has room to grow, but it seems like he never quite hit the stride that he was expected to in Washington. He played on top lines, and nothing. He just couldn't quite hit that. He couldn't get that ball rolling, and now you get him in Colorado. And dailyfaceoff.com has him listed as your second line wing. Is that an okay spot for Burakovsky, or do you think, because again, like I mentioned, the Avalanche are $2 million under the cap, so a move has to be made regardless in order for him to get to not to the cap, but the cap floor, I should say. A move needs to happen regardless for them to get there. Do you see them potentially acquiring a top 6 wing in order to fill out their offense and to potentially drop Burakovsky down to the bottom 6 to alleviate some of that pressure that comes with playing on the second line?
No, I think they're done dealing. They're done signing free agents. They could have signed Ryan Dzingel all this time, and there were some people who said that Dzingel was on their list. I don't think that's true. I don't think he was ever on their list. So no, I think I'm a little. Burakovsky looks like a guy who definitely, everything you said, hasn't proven himself to the point where he's not worth the top 6 given role right away. He's going to have to earn it more. I think he will get a good chance here, but he got good chances in Washington too. I guess he didn't really ever break out. I haven't seen the kid play as much as probably some others are. Who are back east and see more games like that. I have the center ice package too, but there's only so many games you can watch. They gave up a couple picks for him. I was a little surprised they gave up, decent round picks, but he also fits the mold of how the Avalanche usually like to trade for guys. They always like to try to get that guy that they think has been underdeveloped, that they'll be able to, bring that guy into shape and turn him into a player. They've tried that with other guys before. I mean, Nikita Zadorov is a recent example of a defenseman from Buffalo, and that's been to some success, ups and downs, but he's still here. They like younger guys. They like fast guys. I don't think that he's guaranteed to get any top 6 role right away, but he will get a chance else. But I think they've got enough guys that could. Kadri's your 2C. I really do think Eunice Donskoy is going to get a real good chance at a top 6 role. He could be that second line winger right there. They've got JT Compher, who could be a second line winger. He goes back and forth between center and wing. He's a guy that they have to figure out. We still have Tyson Jost around. They Joe Sakic, when he signed Kadri or traded for Kadri, said that he thinks that Tyson Jost will get the first crack at playing left wing on a line with Kadri. So that would be your two LW right there. So short answer is he'll get his chance here, Burakovsky. But nothing's guaranteed, and it's something of a gamble. They acquired him, but they didn't give up the farm for him. They gave up the pick they got from Arizona. And the trade they made there for Carl Soderberg kind of had an extra third-round pick. They pawned it off to Washington for a guy that has some potential. And, let's not forget he scored 2 goals in that Game 7 against Tampa Bay to put him in the Cup Finals. Pretty big goals. They don't win that game without him, probably. So the guy's done something in his career, and the Avalanche certainly are hopeful that they'll do more.
Mikko Rantanen still needs a deal. He's 22, going to be 23 in October. Career highs in goals and assists and in points last season. 31 goals, 56 assists with 87 total points. He's an RFA. What kind of deal is he expected to get? I would assume a long-term lucrative deal to take him into his UFA years. I don't think they'll bridge him. I very much doubt that they will, if that's even a possibility at all in Colorado. I don't believe that's going to happen. So they are, to my knowledge, I feel like looking at a long-term deal is the best and should be the only option for Mikko Rantanen because he's that good of a player. What kind of deal should fans and everybody else in the NHL expect to see Sakic give Mikko Rantanen?
Well, the Avs would love to sign him to a long-term deal, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think it will be a bridge deal.
Really?
Yeah. I've talked to his agent, and that's kind of the vibe I get, is that he's going to do a bridge deal. I would say, I'd say the comparable right now that Joe Sakic is definitely pointing toward, he even said as much, really kind of put it out there, which he doesn't normally do, is Sebastian Aho. 8.4, whatever his number is, from that deal is now Mikko Rantanen's comparable. And I don't think the Avs are going to go a penny over that. They may go a penny over that on a, let's say, if he wants to go into his UFA years, then I think the Avs do, go a little higher on the AAV, but not much. That said, I don't think that Mike Liut is, he's done some long-term deals for some of his clients like Tarasenko. So I'm not saying it's, anything's done one way or the other, but the vibe I get is that, why sign a long-term deal when you're only 2 or 3, 4 years away from UFA? Take a little higher AAV right now if you can, maybe 2 years, $18 million. And play, and then you get you can get 14, 15 million on your next deal. Don't settle for 9 now when you can get 15 3 or 4 years later. So, I think that's something they're still trying to figure out. But we don't have a deal yet. I know the Avs would probably offer whatever they want on a long term. But here's the thing: I think it'd be something like 8 times 9 or something is what they'd want to sign for a long-term deal. Now, does Rantanen only want to make $9 million 7, 8 years from now when he's probably worth 15? He's still in his 20s, when that deal's up? I don't know. The numbers suggest that you should take a shorter-term deal now and then make bigger bucks in UFA, especially in 2 or 3 years when the salary cap is expected to rise again with the new TV contract that they expect is going to really be a big one. Yeah, I think ESPN is going to be back in the mix for hockey. So they're going to get more money from TV. The cap's going to go up. Money to spread around. And the cap goes up, you get more money. Now the risk, of course, is Rantanen signs a 2-year deal and breaks a leg or some other awful thing happens to him, and his career could be over after 2 years. You don't get that 6 more years guaranteed money anymore. So risk on both sides. If I had to bet money, though, right now, I'd say that's going to be a short bridge deal for Rantanen moving forward.
I didn't expect that answer, to be honest with you, and that's interesting that you say that. Is Rantanen going to be worth $15 million down the road? I mean, if he continues this pace, which it looks like he will, right? He's gotten 84 points the year before, now 87 in less games, mind you. He played 81 games in the 17-18 campaign. He played 74 this season, and he put up more points. So time will tell on his production, but it only looks like it's increasing. But $15 million is a number that, at least for right now, at least for July 12th, 2019, sounds like a lot, but as you said, with the cap going up and players earning more money, it would only make sense that a player like Rantanen makes $15 million down the road. Now, you said it. You said you don't know if Rantanen wants to make $9 million 4 or 5 years from now. I don't know about you, Adrian. I would love to make $9 million 4 or 5 years from now. That'd be
so would I.
That would be
but
absolutely.
We don't have Mikko Rantanen. We don't have Mikko Rantanen's skills. We're in a marketplace already where Artemi Panarin got 12.5. Now he was UFA, and you can't compare UFAs to RFAs. That's unfair. But Rantanen. Let's see. When's Rantanen's going to be a UFA? I'm trying to look right now at his. I think he's going to be UFA in 3 years. I might be wrong on that. He's played 3 full years with the Avs. And he played 9 games in 15-16, so he probably needs 4 more years. That's probably why they put him only 1 year at 9 games. That's right, 15-16. It's 4 years. What's the market going to look like in 4 years when maybe the salary cap's $100 million? And guys who are putting up 80 points are definitely going to be getting 12 to 15 million a year. And if Rantanen signs an 8-year deal at $9 million, well, he just cost himself, potentially like $40-50 million. That's how his agent's going to look at it. I don't think he's a greedy guy at all. I think he's a carefree Finnish guy, but he's also a hockey player who pressure from the NHLPA on these things too. They don't like hometown discounts. They don't like that at all for young guys. And he's going to probably get as much money as he's worth. And a lot of guys take that short money deal, but look what Nathan MacKinnon did. 2 or 3 years ago, he signed a long-term deal. He's making $6.3 million now for the next 4 seasons. You don't think that's a contract he might regret right now?
It's a great contract for Colorado, though.
Right. Well, it's not for him, though, is it?
Sure.
And
absolutely.
If he'd signed a shorter bridge deal, he'd be making 12 right now. So that's my point on this. And again, I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I do think it's going to be a bridge deal, and one of us will be right, I guess, either or. I mean, I'm not betting on it. I'm not reporting that it's going to happen. I'm just saying, to me, that's my hunch anyway.
Fair enough. And also, you take a look at in conglomerate all the moves that they've done to this point. If you were to give the Avalanche an overall grade as to everything that they've done since, I guess, the second that they were eliminated in the playoffs, or maybe right before the draft started, to make this the window a little bit shorter here, from that point to 1:25 p.m. Eastern Time, July 12th, 2019, what would you grade all the moves that they've done to this point?
Oh, I think I'd give them an A minus. I mean, I think I think they hit 2 home runs at the draft. First of all, they got Bo Byram, who's best defenseman prospect in the draft. Now they've got a top 2 they're looking at of next 10 years of Cale Makar and Bo Byram, lefty righty. That's gonna solve so many problems when you've got that top 2D just set like that. You can just. I mean, it just makes everything easier. So that was, the number 16 pick, Alex Newhook. I saw him in camp, and I was. Now everybody says this. Oh God, I can't believe we got this guy. Oh God, this guy has got so. But I'm telling you, I saw him play at a camp, rookie, development camp here, and my God, I was impressed. Like, I think they stole that guy from what I've seen. So he's coming on the way. He's a top 6 forward. He's probably going to take his time at BC and play a year there. But if he shows well enough, like he could be player on the Avalanche roster this fall. I mean, next spring. I'm sorry. He could do the 1 year sign at the end of the year and come on and join him in the playoffs. Cale Makar did it, but he took 2 years at UMass. Well, Newhook may be so good that they do one, or they take their time and do it right, maybe. So great draft. And then I like the free agent moves. They did want Panarin a lot. I mean, they flew the owner out to New York. Joe Sakic flew with the owner to make a personal pitch in New York City to him. They offered him 4 years, $50 million, which would have been 12.5 cap hit, which is nearly $1 million more than he's getting with the Rangers right now. Granted, it's a shorter term deal, but I do think that if Panarin had said no on the 4 years, $50 million, that they would have tried to go longer and give him a longer term deal and pretty close to that same cap, I bet. But he said no. The bright lights of New York City won over Denver on that case. In that case, you just got to tip your hat to the Big Apple and move on. I like the guys they got. Otherwise, I mean, I think it would have been a little disappointing if they entered training camp without that Kadri acquisition and still that worry at the 2C spot. Then I would have given like a B plus for the grade. But I think that when they got Kadri and gave up a guy that they were going to trade anyway, they didn't want to sign Tyson Barrie to a long-term deal. He's going to be UFA after this 1 year. To get Kadri coming in here. And by the way, this kid, Callie Rosen, that is the throw end of the deal. I'll tell you what, a lot of Toronto Maple Leaf watchers that I respect think that he's going to be more than just a throw in, that he's going to play regularly in the league at some point. So, a long time ago, the Avalanche got a guy named Patrick Waugh in a trade, and they was like, oh, by the way, they got Mike Keane too. Well, Mike Keane turned out to be a pretty important player here for a lot of years and a lot of teams. But, Jonas Donskoy, I'm going to misspell his name all the time, mispronounce it. I think it's Jonas Donskoy. I did talk to him on the phone yesterday. I think he said Junis hi, this is Junis. So I'm going to go with that. But I like him a lot as a player. I think he's a two-way, 200-foot player. He kind of gets in your face a little bit. And they needed a guy like that. He put up 40 points on this team. I think that's a win. Burakovsky's the question mark. Could be a dud, or could be, a nice pickup. So those are the moves, and I'd say A minus definitely for the past month. I mean, the Avalanche are a better team than they were a month ago. I think that's fairly safe thing to say.
Yeah, and I would agree with you on that one. One last question before I let you go, Adrian. Really appreciate you taking the time. With Varlamov leaving in free agency, now your two goaltenders are Philip Grubauer and Paolo Francouz, and obviously, Varlamov was a very steady goaltender for a while, and then he lost the starting spot to Grubauer late in the season, and then in the playoffs, and then Varlamov became expendable because of that. But now with Grubauer holding down the fort as the starting goaltender for the entire season, how confident are you in Grubauer's ability to maintain his play for the entire season as a number one goaltender? And also, what is the bar for the Avalanche in this upcoming season? Where did they have to, if they, obviously winning the cup is number one and will always be every season for everybody, but in terms of deeming the next season as a success or a failure, where's the cutoff? Where is if they make it to the playoffs at all, is it a success? Is it a second round exit, conference final exit? If they make it to the final, where's the cutoff between success and failure from looking at it in a season perspective? Obviously, of course, again, winning the cup is the ultimate success, but only one team wins it. So if they don't win it, where's the success and where's the failure next season?
Second question first, I guess. I think that they've got to finish higher than eighth in the West. That's for sure. They've their last. Let's see. No, the last two have been number 8. I wanted to say the last 3, but I think they were 7th the 1 year in 13-14. Not 7th. I'm sorry. There was a year before that. Anyway, forget that. The last 2 years they've been 8th place, and they've got to do better than that. They can't just sneak in and on game. 2 years ago was game 82 that they needed to win to get in the playoffs. Last year was game 81. They actually got to take one game off. So they've got to do better than that. They can't be having to fight for their lives just to get in the playoffs. They need at least top 6 spot. So you know what, playoffs are difficult for me to judge right on absolute success and failure. It's so easy to lose in that first round. Just ask the Tampa Bay Lightning. Just ask all the other favorites. Just ask all the other top favorites who went into this year's playoffs and got knocked off by the 4 lower seeds. All 4 of them. I hate to say it's going to be an absolute failure if they don't go past the second round. No, to me, the absolute failure would be if they, first of all, don't make the playoffs. That's for sure a failure. If they're only 8th again and they're just kind of mucking around to try and sneak in and surprise people, I don't think that's a success. They've got to be, I think they've got to contend for the division title. I mean, yes, St. Louis is the defending Cup winner, but I don't put a lot of odds on St. Louis being a repeat champion. Sorry, I just don't. Nashville, to me, doesn't look as good, even though they got Matt Duchene. I didn't like the fact that they dealt Weber. Subban. So success let's say top 6, hopefully top 4, maybe win the division. That's success. After the bat, if they don't win a cup in the next 5 years, I think that's a failure. I think if they make it to the second round, that's still a pretty good year. If they don't win in a second round in the next 2 or 3 years, then we're starting to talk about failures and stuff like that. But I still think they maybe have one more year of get in the playoffs, to be competitive. If you win a round or 2, great. And then, if you win a cup, great. We've seen teams that can do it with just catching lightning, in a bottle. But other than that, let's call short-term failure or not making the playoffs, that's for sure, or 8th place. A little longer-term failure, maybe they don't win a cup in the next 5 years. With the talent they have, I think they should at least get to a cup final. And so talk to me in 5 years.
Fair enough. And the goaltending question. How about how about Grubauer? Are you confident in him?
I think so. I mean, I think he's a very intelligent guy who works hard at his craft. Most goalies are very cerebral, intelligent guys, and I think he is. I think he had a horrible start, but I think that happens when a goalie goes to a new team. Sometimes you definitely have a transition period that's tough. Varlamov had a bad start to his Avs career too. He got better as time went on. I think he's a good goalie who has potential to be an excellent goalie. He certainly was in the playoffs for the most part, and really, led that team and down the stretch to get into the playoffs. There is some question about whether you can be a durable guy and play the full season, but I expect obviously the backup now, Francouz, who I don't know anything about, but who has good numbers everywhere he's played. I think he'll be a decent guy who can play 20 games and 25 games. So, yeah, I'm pretty confident about it. Goaltending, you're always a little worried. They're just, some guys can get red hot and some guys can get ice cold, and you could never quite know why. But, I think it was time for Varlamov for a change for both him and the team. And, I was a little surprised he got 4 years on his next deal. But good guy, and I hope he does well in Long Island. And, he's going to have a good goalie coach and defensive coach, that's for sure. So I wouldn't be surprised if he has very good numbers this coming season. The question for him is, can he stay healthy? He really has not done that in the last several years, and I think that's something the Avalanche did worry about quite a bit going forward. So, hence the change. But I think they have feel pretty good about their goaltending situation.
Would you want to see them go for someone like Jonathan Quick, who's probably on his way out of LA, even though he still has 4 years left on his deal at 5.8? Or do you think Grubauer is the guy, at least for now, and then they'll ride him until they can't ride him anymore?
Well, I guess if Grubauer stinks to start the year and half of the year, and Quick is still available, maybe. He's had plenty of injury problems too, though. He's getting a little older, so it sounds like fool's gold a little bit to me. I like Jonathan Quick. 1-2 cups. I like any guy who's done that, but I think he may have been offered for a reason on the market too, if he was by the Kings, and the fact that nobody's taken him is maybe indicative of what the real marketplace is for Jonathan Quick. And at this point, yeah, I don't think the Avs would go near that. But when teams get desperate and they have a bad goalie, anything can happen.
Absolutely. Adrian, I really appreciate taking the time. Plug your social media or anything else you want to plug. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, man. Well, I just started a subscription site a month ago, and it's called Colorado Hockey Now. And, you can check it out if you're an Avalanche fan. I think we're going to give you the best coverage that you can find on the team. Of course, I'm a little biased on that, but we've been going full guns blazing here for a month now, and I'm way ahead of projections on what I thought I'd sell for this. And so check that out, ColoradoHockeyNow.com. I'm on ADater at Twitter. I'm not quite as active on Twitter maybe as I used to be, and that's probably a good thing. But I'm still on there, so check it out. Hope to hear from you. Thanks for having me, bud.
Absolutely, Adrian. Thanks a lot. For the second half of the show, we are talking about the Buffalo Sabres, another team that's been quite active since the draft. Biggest moves, including trading for Colin Miller at the draft, trading for Jimmy Vesey on July 1st, signing Marcus Johansson to a 2-year deal, and a couple of days ago, trading Alex Nylander to Chicago for Henry Jokiharju. Just talked to Adrian about where the line between the success and failure is for the Avs, but where is it for the Sabres? Is this a playoff team this upcoming season, or will they extend their drought for one more year when a big chunk of their contracts expire and they'll have more cap flexibility? Joining Chel for the second half of the show is managing editor of SB Nation's Die by the Blade, co-host of Beyond the Blade Hockey podcast, and coloring book GM, according to one person on Twitter, Chad DeDominicis. Chad, what's up? Welcome to the show.
Hey, man, what's going on? It's been a while.
It has been a while. Last time you were on, I checked this before you came on, episode number 8, which was nice. 11 months ago. A lot has changed since then.
Yeah, I'd say just a little bit.
Sources say that a little bit has changed in 11 months since you've last appeared on the show. So the Sabres have been active since the draft, like I just mentioned. Biggest moves, Colin Miller, Jimmy Vesey, now Marcus Johansson. Let's talk about this trade that happened a couple of days ago. Alex Nylander shipped off to Chicago, I should say, for Henry Jokiharju. A trade that immediately when it happened seemed like Chicago kind of did they fall asleep? What's going on in Chicago there? Because it seems like the overwhelming majority of people are saying that this is a huge win, myself included, for the Buffalo Sabres. Alex Nylander, fringe NHL player right now. Henry Jokiharju has a much higher ceiling, and this is a question mark deal for Chicago. It almost seems like the Blackhawks can only make deals in which either they win big or they lose big. They got DeHaan for a bag of pucks from Carolina. They won that deal, and now they turn around and then they trade Jokiharju for not the same return. So it's a very strange move for Chicago. But what do the Sabres get out of this deal? Talk about Nylander for a little bit, and what do you get in Henry Jokiharju?
Yeah, so, with Nylander, I think Chicago's banking on a player, that'll rebound in the right situation in the NHL. I don't necessarily think they're wrong. I'll caution them if they think they're going to get a Dylan Strome type turnaround, because I don't think that's happening. But you put him in the right situation, maybe with Patrick Kane or Alex DeBrincat or Jonathan Toews or even Dylan Strome. You put better players around him in a top 6 situation that forced Nylander to be involved in the game, force him to move his feet and be engaged. Yeah, I think you can get an okay player out of it. I don't think he's ever going to reach his ceiling that was talked about when he was drafted back in 2016, but I don't think you're getting some slouch either, like I said, but in the right situation. If he's put in a bottom 6 role, then I think he's going to get lost, he's going to be invisible, and we kind of saw that with Rochester in the AHL, and even his time here in Buffalo. When he played with good players, he was noticeable, but when he was down in the lineup, when he did get his NHL chances, he was invisible at times. So I think that's what they're banking on, to trying to take a crack at a player who has talent, he has some skill, he has some nice shooting ability, and hoping it works out for them. Now, on the other side, in the Sabres, with Jokiharju, I think this is kind of a no-brainer move for them. I'm impressed what they got back for Nylander. I wondered what Nylander's value was around the league. I guess it really only takes one team to believe in him, and you kind of found that in Chicago. And you got back a 20-year-old defenseman who's a first-round pick 2 years ago, who played 38 games, a 19-year-old in the NHL with the Blackhawks on a top pair minute situation, and didn't throw up all over himself, and in fact looked pretty good doing it. So, he's another puck-moving defenseman that likes to get up in the play offensively, but is also pretty good for a 20-year-old, 19-year-old, in his own end of the ice. So it's another right shot defenseman in this rebuilt Sabres right side now with Brandon Montour, Colin Miller, and Yoki Haru. You still have Rasmus Ristolainen around here, but I'll be surprised if he's on the roster to start the season. But it's a really nice move. It solidifies their defense. It gives them some more depth if he doesn't start in the NHL, but I think I'd be kind of surprised if he doesn't. So, yeah, good on them. They right now it looks like they pulled off a great trade, and I think at the end of the day, worst case scenario, it works out for both sides, and there's nothing ever really wrong with that.
Well, you mentioned Colin Miller, and let's talk about that trade for a second here. You traded a second-round pick in 2021 and a fifth-round pick in 2022 to Vegas for Colin Miller, and now you've added two really solid, I think, defensemen to balance out that defense. So you got Dahlin now, Montour, Miller, Yoki Haru in the mix. As you mentioned, Ristolainen probably not on the opening day roster, and we'll get to him in a second here. But now you take a look at the roster, at least on paper, and it's at least in my opinion, also Jake McCabe in the mix as well, and Pilot, and you got a whole bunch of defensemen that are good now, as opposed to what you saw last year, 2 years down the road, 2 years ago, where the defense just was not that great, and now you have a lot of talent on that blue line, which has been a big positive, at least from what I've seen so far, that the Sabres have really addressed. That you have a blue line that is you're not going to walk over this blue line. You're not going to have Bogosian as a black hole on the blue line. He is still signed to a 1-year deal at $5.1 something million. But let's be honest here, probably not going to play a whole lot in the NHL, at least with the Sabres this season, if he stays on that roster. He is going to be
he's hurt too, so that he's probably going to be out till around December.
Yeah, and he's going to be a UFA, and you're right about that. He's going to be a UFA after this season, so he does have the A on his jersey. But let's be honest here, there are at this point, at least in my opinion, 6 Sabres defensemen that are better than Zach Bogosian at this current stage of the year. So I would be surprised if, when he does return from injury, that he gets at least a regular spot in the lineup. But coaches have done some crazier things in the past, so time will tell about that. But in terms of the overall blue line, Chad, what do you think about the changes that have been made in this offseason? Colin Miller, again, a huge addition. Montour, like you added at the deadline, a big addition. Now you got Yoki Haru. How does this blue line look to you?
Yeah, it's night and day from, I think, even we're about to start the season to maybe 2 years ago. It's crazy how good of a job Brattl's done kind of reshaping that blue line. Winning the draft lottery and getting Rasmus Dahlin will certainly help, expedite that process for sure. That's your stud number one defenseman for the next decade. But, beyond that, he's added a lot. Miller, Montour, Yoki Haru now. And, you mentioned Lawrence Pilot, who he picked out of Sweden last summer and had a really good rookie year and looks like a really nice player. So, they have the making of a really nice blue line coming up. The problem is, at this point, they have too many of them. Bogosian, they decided, is an extra defenseman at this point, but he's hurt, so he probably won't be back till December. Even Pilot's probably going to miss the beginning of the season, as he had shoulder surgery in the offseason as well. Marco Scandella is still hanging out for one more year. Matt Hunwick is still here for one more year. Casey Nelson is also around for one more year. He played some defense for him last year when he wasn't hurt. So there's a lot of defensemen. Even Jake McCabe, again, he's an RFA and doesn't have a contract yet. So I wonder what his status is, because his name's been out there in some trade discussions. So there's still definitely some work to be done here, with Botterill. Not only maybe bringing in one more player, but I think there's a lot of weight that he has to get out. I mean, he's brought in these players, but he hasn't really shipped anything out besides Nylander. It's been all draft picks and free agent signings. So that's kind of the next interesting part here, and along with the Ristolainen trade that'll bring you back some sort of player probably, but how he gets this extra weight off the roster to kind of make things make more sense here.
I would think, at least from what it looks like on paper, that Ristolainen gets shipped out for center. Because if you take a look at your centers, you have Jack Eichel, obviously number one. You have Casey Middlestat, who is he going to be the second line center right away? I don't know if you want to do that. And then you have Gergensons, who got re-signed to a one-year deal, and Evan Rodriguez, who I know you've been raving about as the fourth-line center, but DailyFaceoff.com right now has him as the third-line center, which is probably not where you want him. So would you then trade Ristolainen for a second-line center? Because, I mean, you take a look at this offense, and right now, this is the biggest issue still with Buffalo. It's better now than it was in the past, and since the rebuild started, basically. But you still have Kyle Okposo, who at 31 still isn't old, right? But he's slowed down dramatically since coming to Buffalo, since playing with the Islanders. You got Jimmy Vesey from the Rangers for a third-round pick. Now, as a Rangers fan, I can tell you about Jimmy Vesey. He's okay offensively, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about this since the trade. He's okay offensively, but defensively is a black hole. He will not stop. He just won't. He's not capable of playing good defense. So if you're looking for a third line kind of guy to even out the defense here, or some depth scoring, you might have that, but you won't get much else from Jimmy Vesey. So the question now becomes, where else are you going to get this offense from? You signed Mojo, like I said, to a 2-year deal, so that's good. That's a very good signing, I thought, especially for that AAV. Not a whole lot of money, not a whole lot of term, something that will definitely bolster the offense. But you still have Kyle Okposo. You have Connor Sherry playing potentially top 6 minutes. And that's, if you're looking at it, at least on paper, it's not great. And I would think that if you trade Ristolainen, which I think is more probable than not at this point, that you will get my estimation would be a center, but it wouldn't surprise me if you got a winger either.
Yeah, so I mean, working backwards with VC, it's right now. I mean, you look at it. If I'm drawing out a roster, I think he's your fourth line left winger now. He's probably, they just re-signed Johan Larsson today, so that's, as of now, you're probably your fourth line center, which is fine. And then you're going to have Kyle Okposo as probably your fourth line right winger. So the thing about, I mentioned VC struggles defensively. Well, that could be okay if you put him with Larsson and Okposo, two guys who struggle maybe offensively. At least in the last few years, they haven't had that guy with them, and especially Larsson's case, that can fill the net. Where Larsson kind of, at least last year, he generated some scoring chances in a way. I mean, he kind of controlled puck possession when he was on the ice as a fourth line most of the time, but he never really had that finish or that score where VC could be that. So that kind of gives you some depth down your lineup. And then I think working up, Johansson and Sherry kind of maybe, I don't know, are they your third/first/second? I don't know. I guess they're in your top 9 somewhere. Both guys can play either wing. Evan Rodriguez in that mix too. I think if he's your third line center, as of now, that's not the end of the world. I'm a big Rodriguez fan. I think he's underrated for what he does. He's good at both ends of the ice. He plays with speed. He controls possession. He generates a lot of shots. I think he's a very underrated player for what he provides. So I don't think it's the end of the world if he's your third line center. Maybe you're a hybrid 2-3, depending how you want to work with Middlestat, who would then be your second line center / third line center. So I guess those two would kind of work in unison depending on how they're playing in a game. But the one player you didn't mention who, is in the mix here too, and probably in the top 6 role, is Victor Olofsson. He came over from Sweden last year, put up really impressive numbers in the AHL as a 24 or 23-year-old rookie. His scoring translated from Europe to North America, playing on that smaller ice, which is really good to see. He has arguably one of the best shots in the league right now coming in. Just not a lot of people know about him. Watching him shoot the puck is incredible. Like if you're listening to this, go Google or put on Twitter, just type in Victor Olofsson goal and find some goals where the puck just jumps off his stick in the net. It's pretty awesome to watch. So, he got some time with Eichel and Reinhart at the end of last year, and he looked pretty good doing that. So I'm not sure he's going to play with Eichel. That's going to be Skinner's spot probably, but maybe if you put him with Sam Reinhart, who we played with, and let Sam Reinhart set him up, put him with Casey Middlestat, all of a sudden, Reinhart is probably the second or third best forward on this team, depending how you kind of want to compare him and Skinner behind Eichel. So it's let him dictate play, let him carry that line for you, along with Middlestat and Olofsson, and you probably have a real nice scoring line there. So the hole remains is what they're going to do at right wing with Eichel. I guess you can put Evan Rodriguez there. You can maybe put Connor Sheary in that spot. And then you throw in Gergensons in the bottom, and the fourth line, and BC moves up, or maybe Arturo Rustalainen, who they signed out of Finland, maybe he makes a team as a surprise, and he's that fourth line left winger, and then BC moves up to the third line. So there's still a lot of moving parts here, and that I think ties back into the Ristolainen thing, where I'm not necessarily sure they're looking for a top six center per se. They just drafted Dylan Cousins, so maybe in not this season, but the next, they kind of anticipate him being on the roster, so they want to have a spot there for him. So I think the need is a right winger, to be honest. I think they need a top six right winger to fall in behind Reinhart. And speaking of Reinhart's another option they could put at center too. He's done it before. So, if going back to center, they can move him to center as well, but they need another right winger in here. And I think that's what they're going to be looking for in a Ristolainen trade. And, I think eventually they'll find a team that'll do it. I wonder if kind of Jake Gardner is holding things up here with him not signing yet, but I think eventually that'll happen, and it'll be a top six forward coming back.
Well, this leads me to my poll question for this week, which was, which team has made the better offseason moves? Now, Adrian Dater, of course, is a Avs guy, and you were a Sabres guy, so the four options I put were Buffalo, Colorado. Both made great moves, and both made bad moves. Of these four, which of these would you pick to be the winner?
Oh, that's tough. I really like the Donskoy signing for Colorado. I think that's really nice. I think getting Kadri is going to be nice for Colorado too. And they have a nice little team going there. I'm kind of curious to see kind of how it shakes out with the Rotten in there. I was a big fan of Alex Kerfoot, so I think losing him might hurt Colorado a little bit. I know some Avs fans weren't a big fan of his, but his underlying numbers are pretty impressive. So, I got to think they'll make something there. But again, getting Kadri back could account for that. So, I don't know. It's tough from the Sabres standpoint. They haven't done anything you would say, quote unquote, that's huge, but they've done a lot of nice things to bolster areas the roster they need. So I guess if you're going to pin me down to something, I would go with the option. They both made good moves, and I can see them both improving off of it.
And I agree with you. I think the Colin Miller move was fantastic for you, and I'm not a huge fan of the VC move only because I've seen him play, and I am not that impressed with him. It really comes down to there's certain games where he's noticeable, and then there are other games where you forget he's even in the lineup. He's I don't even want to say he's streaky, because he's invisible more times than he isn't, and which I guess is a good thing, right? Because if you're not doing well, then you're not invisible either. So
right.
If you're invisible, then I guess you're neutral. So I guess that's not the worst thing you can be.
And a third round pick for a guy in a contract year isn't the worst swing to take either,
Yeah, again, if you're looking for depth scoring, if you're looking, like you said, if you want to put him on your fourth line wing, then that's not bad. You could do a lot worse at your fourth line wing than Jimmy Vesey. Obviously, right. the Yoki Haru trade was an A+. There should be there's no argument for me anyway regarding who won this trade. This is a clear-cut Sabres win, unless Chicago could somehow make Alex Nylander the next Dylan, the next Strome, which I guess could happen. but the likelihood is not that high, at least in my opinion. So I think you won this trade easily as well. So if you were to give the Sabres an overall grade from let's say the draft until now, let's put aside the names that they drafted, so Cousins and all those guys, let's disregard for a second here in terms of draft trades and till today, what would be the grade that you would give this Buffalo Sabres with the trades and signings and everything in between?
Honestly, I'll give you 2 grades. The first grade I'm going to give them is an I, and that's incomplete. Because I think the last move here to overall grade the offseason is going to be what happens with Ristolainen. I think if he returns to your roster and you don't address a top 6 forward, then your grade drops. So setting Ristolainen aside, I think overall, at this point, I would give him a B++, I guess you think, just sort of an A. And the reason is, again, because I don't think they've addressed their biggest need of a top 6 forward yet. So setting aside Ristolainen, I'll give him a B+. And until Ristolainen is traded overall, I'm going to give him an I of incomplete, because I think that's their big, quote-unquote, big move of the offseason. And that can kind of really give us an idea of what kind of team we're going to have here next season.
That's fair enough. And I talked to Adrian about this as well. In terms of where the line is drawn for this particular season, in a few months here, let's disregard future seasons for now, at least. In terms of next season only, where's the line between success and failure for the Buffalo Sabres? Is it a failure if they miss the playoffs? Is it a failure if they lose in the first round of the playoffs? Where is that line between we can handle this and move on, and this is an utter disaster?
It's unquestioned they have to be in the playoff race at the very least until the end. I'm not sure they absolutely have to make the playoffs, but they need to be dang near close to make it. And if they don't, they need to miss by 2 or 3 points. And I think anything else under that is unacceptable. And I think it's that straightforward and that easy.
So they had 76 points last season, and the line to get in was higher than normal at 98 for Columbus to make it in as the last spot. Do you think they'll let's say the line is that high to make the playoffs again next season? Montreal had 96 and they didn't make the playoffs, which I think was either the highest or the second highest point total in the history of the league to not make it to the playoffs. So let's say it's the same way next season. Do you think this team right now, obviously we don't know what's going to happen with Ristolainen, but let's say nothing happens in this and the trade deadline never happens and all of that. Let's say with the roster that they have today, are they a 98-point caliber team?
No, I don't think so. And that's, like I said, that's because they don't have that other forward up top to give them enough scoring. I think they'll be improved. I think they can be in the conversation with some bounce back seasons, and if Victor Olofsson gives them some more scoring, if Dahlin takes that next step to being what we all know he's probably going to be, you're going to see improvement. Like I said, I think at the very least they have to be a 90-point team. Right now, as currently constructed, I'm not sure they're there, but that one trade can definitely change everything.
And you take a look at their cap situation as well. This year, they have a lot of money tied up in players that are either making too much money or are hurt and are not playing right now. You got Bogosian signed to a one-year deal, like we talked about earlier. Sobotka, $3.5 million for this season. There's a huge chunk of the roster that doesn't have a contract next season. The biggest notable names that are going to be RFAs, like Sam Reinhart, Casey Middlestat, need new contracts, and Brandon Montour as well. But there's a lot of UFAs like Sobotka, like Sheary, like Scandella and Bogosian, and Matt Hunwick as well, that are going to be UFAs, which clears up a lot of cap space for next season and beyond. Now, of course, you're going to have to sign, like I mentioned, Middlestat and Sam Reinhart and Dahlin in 2 seasons as well. So you're going to have to want to leave some space for him. But the Sabres are going to have a lot of money to play with next season. And there's gonna be some names out there that are worth mentioning down the road. How do you think that the Sabres are going to use this space? Do you think they'll leave a little bit more than they potentially should to leave as breathing room for the RFAs, or do you think they'll go into July 1st next season with all these UFAs with all this money and say, let's go out there and show the Sabres fans and show the rest of the league that we are going to sign a big name free agent, that we are not to be messed with, that we are on a mission to make the playoffs next season? The season afterwards.
Yeah, it's interesting because, Jason Bottle has come off as the guy who likes to spend big in free agency. He really hasn't done that in his few years here in Buffalo. He's more of that second tier type guy, and that's kind of the targets he goes after. I think, I mentioned they have to sign Montour. They're going to have to sign Reinhart. They're going to have to. I wonder what they're going to do with their goalie situation if Allmark and Hutton falter again this year. Maybe they need to go out and get a goaltender. Maybe if Casey Middlestat doesn't make that next step, maybe you do have to consider going out there and spending on a center. So maybe use that money for that. And depending what they bring in a Ristolainen trade, it could be another. If it's a cost control player right now on entry level contract or a second contract, it's not that expensive. That's expiring. Then maybe you got to pay that guy too. And Dahlin in 2 years, I guarantee you right now, Dahlin's going to be over $10 million, if not more than that, in 2 years. So. You got to account for that. Reinhardt's probably going to be around 7.5, if not more than that, if he has another good season. Middlestat, we'll kind of see how this season goes. And Montour, same thing, and down the road, going to have to pay Yoki Haru, depending on how that goes, and if you want to bring Colin Miller back or not in a couple of years. So there's some decisions down the road, but I think at the very least it gives them some flexibility. I don't know if they're going to go out and try to run down, he's in my head, Tyler Toffoli next season as a free agent if he makes it. I don't know. They might if they can't address their top 6 issues in terms of a winger, but I just so far Bottle's not that guy to go spend big in free agency. So maybe it's via trade, but like you said, they have a lot of flexibility here coming up in the next year or so. So that's good. Having cap space is good. You can do things with it. You can weaponize it, which Bottle has done. The last few years, Colin Miller was taking money from Vegas that Vegas couldn't afford. Same thing with Connor Sheary in the Matt Hunwick trade, the year prior to that. So he's done it before, and it makes sense. And having that cap space is never a bad thing.
Also, one thing that I didn't mention earlier is Cody Hodgson is still on the books, just under $800,000 for 4 more seasons. Yep. So he's getting that check in the mail every year. Which $800K for not doing anything is pretty great if you ask me. Not quite Bobby Bonilla level and not quite Rick DiPietro level, but not that bad for Cody Hodgson. And you also mentioned the goalie situation. You have Carter Hutton, you have Linus Ullmark. Linus needs a new contract. He's an RFA right now. How confident are you in this 1-2 tandem? Are you okay with letting them ride out the season? How comfortable are you in their success if they will have success? Is this a question mark in net? Do they go and acquire a goaltender? Let's say if they're 5 points out of a playoff spot come the deadline, and Carter Hutton and Linus Ullmark are pulling a .904 save percentage, let's say theoretically. Will they go out and acquire a goaltender? What's the situation like in the crease for the Buffalo Sabres?
It's interesting because Hutton has 2 years left, so I think he'll be here for the next 2 years. Whether he's going to be a starter or a backup, I think is the question. I think the main focus is what are you going to get on Ullmark. He started strong last year and then really fell off a cliff at the end. So I don't know. And, as of this point, down the road in the future, 2-3 years, maybe it's as soon as 2, depending how he develops here, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, I believe, is their future in goal. He's going to make his pro debut this season in Rochester in the AHL. Now, he had off-season hip surgery, so that might delay the start of his season, but that kid is impressive. He led Finland to a gold medal in the World Junior. He won OHL Player of the Year. goaltender of the year, in juniors this past season. So he's 20 years old. He looks like a really, really legit goaltender moving forward. But you know how goalies can be; they can be a little weird. So you never want to say anything for certain in terms of prospects of goaltenders. But I think he's definitely your future on the road. It's just, how do you get there? Is Allmark going to be able to get you to that point? Are Allmark and Hutton combined going to be able to get you out of there? I don't know. If they're struggling at the deadline, I don't know. Maybe you look into it. Maybe you swap Allmark and something else and see if that works for you for a couple of years. I don't know. So it's hard to say at this point without knowing kind of how Allmark rebounds or how he'll play, but it's definitely worth something keeping an eye on for sure.
And circling back to Ristolainen here, the idea is that he will be gone before puck drops in September for preseason. What would be the ultimate trade for the Sabres for Ristolainen? You want a forward, like we mentioned, but who in particular is kind of that you have an eye on? Is there anybody in particular that you have in the back of your mind as this could be a player that would be tremendous for the Sabres offense?
I think Winnipeg, kind of the team, honestly, to me, makes the most sense here. The teams that are looking for a defenseman, they still need help on their blue line. They have to sign Laine. They have to sign Kyle Connor. So they're kind of the team, and even Andrew Copp needs a contract too. So they're kind of the team that...
And Laine.
Yeah, Laine, yep, that I have to focus on here, that I focused on here in terms of a trade. So, Nick Ehlers' name has been out there a little bit. I think the Sabres would have to add if they want to get him out of Winnipeg. I'm not sure Winnipeg wants to do that. But maybe it's a situation where, we've heard Jack Roslovic might want out of Winnipeg because he's not getting the playing time. I think maybe that's a guy who's young and has some talent, a former first-round pick, or maybe you can throw him on the first line with Eichel and Skinner and get something there. And then to make it worth Winnipeg's while, and taking on Ristolainen and giving them some maybe cap space or whatever you have to do there, maybe you take back some money. Maybe it's a guy like Matthew Perreault, who's still at 31 years old, has 2 years left on his contract, but he still can play. Maybe it's an Adam Lowry, who's a decent player, but maybe they're just trying to get some money out of there. I don't think Dmitry Kulikov makes sense because he has a no-trade clause, and there's not a chance in the world he's waiting that to come back to Buffalo because he definitely made it clear to not enjoy his time here. So I don't think that's realistic, but, maybe it's Perreault and Roslovic and something else, one way or the other, and, that's kind of your deal. It's Roslovic isn't that flashy name that people will know, but I think he could definitely be a real good get for them coming back.
Chad, really appreciate you giving me your time here. As always, you've been awesome. And again, it's next time you come on, I would appreciate it if you don't take 11 months to do it. If you could be on a little bit more frequently than that, I would appreciate it, and I feel like my listeners would as well. Again, thank you so much for taking the time. Plug your social media. Plug anything you want to plug. The floor is yours, man.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at CMDedominicis, DEDOMINICIS. And then you can find my work at Die by the Blade. At Die by the Blade on Twitter is our Sabres SB Nation website with myself and a whole bunch of other excellent writers. And then also the podcast at BTB Hockey, Beyond the Blade. Some awesome Sabres content there with myself and Anthony Chandra, you've had on the podcast before.
Of course, friend of the program.
One of the 3 co-hosts for that show as well. So good stuff there. So that's kind of where you can find me. He
has dubbed me the 201st hockey man trademark. So I like whenever I tweet that out, I like to tag him in it because it's so funny, that tag, because it's just one of those things that's like the 200 hockey man, the 200 hockey men term is such a, I don't want to say derogatory at this point but you take a look at it, right, and you see the context in which it's used. It's just 200 hockey men, or the old boys club, the ones that don't care about analytics and all that. They only care about the hashtag grit and the heart and all that. And as a 201st hockey man, my objective is to get the other 200 hockey men into the future, or at least the present, and get them on board with, hey, maybe analytics are good, and hashtag grit isn't isn't nearly as valuable as you think it is. So that is my objective as the 201st Hockey Man trademark. Thank you to Anthony for giving me that title. But Chad, again, super appreciate you coming on, and I'll talk to you again real soon, hopefully, and not in 11 months.
Yeah, hey, man, sounds good.
And this has been episode number 56 of Chel Squared, number 57 coming up next week. I'll talk to you then.